So a while back, my school switched to an online platform for giving students assignments and tracking students' progress. It made our lives hell. Teachers would abuse the platform by giving us a lot of assignments, even during holidays. The worst part was that they could see when we opened the assignment page, and if we were even a minute late, the platform would flag it as late. The worst part was that my school would give these assignments a 50% weightage for the final grade, with the rest of the 50% going towards exams. After the introduction of this platform, all students' grades started to fall hard. Most people lost at least one letter grade. I know doing work is important and all, but if all of your subject teachers are giving assignments every day with submission at 9 p.m. the same day, it is an impossible task for anyone. Our school also expected us to log out extracurricular activities on the platform and put regular reflections and evidence for the same, or else they would fail us. This part comes in later. We tried to reason with the school management, but they said that students should do as told by their teachers, and back when we were students, we also had to do hard work. After having ruined my sweet winter vacation with over 40 assignments in a period of 2 weeks, I decided that we needed revenge. I did some digging and found out that our school used an online platform which had decent documentation available. All they had done was host a version of that on their own servers. The platform they used allowed for integration with file hosting service. If enabled, it allowed students to upload files to the platform. My school had enabled it for assignment submission and putting evidence for the extracurricular activities. After a little more Googling, I found out that the file hosting service does not offer any unlimited plan. The file hosting service even charged for every time the file was downloaded or uploaded. The prices were very low, so I think that the school admin team was okay with it. I had found my opportunity for revenge. I asked a few of my friends to help me execute it. The core team was formed. My friends and I started to make a database of thousands of reflections and evidence. We asked our seniors, who were more than happy to help. We asked students from other schools who had the same platform. Once they found out about our plan, they asked me to do the same to their school's server. Also, we drafted tons of them ourselves. At the end of this, we had a database of over 5,000 activities and 50,000 reflections and evidence. This took the 12 of us about 2 months to make. I, being familiar with programming, made a program which would look at the database and then put it on the school's platform. Here is the fun part. In the evidence section, I made the program upload a 500 MB file. The maximum file size we were allowed to upload was 500 M. Download it and remove it. My program would do this over 50 times, after which it would upload the real file that was supposed to be there. I also made sure to check the terms of service and privacy policy of the platform, which stated that no record of deleted files will be stored. Just to be sure, I made the bot only go all out from 3 p.m. to 8 a.m., since no teacher or admin ever went online during that time. The bot would still be going in the gap, but it would not be uploading the fake files, since we could not risk the school finding out about this. Of course, I could not do this from my home computer, since I did not have the bandwidth to make any significant impact. Here's where my genius takes this to a whole new level. My friends and I had Edu email IDs, which we used to get creds on some server providers. One. Edu email ID would give about $100 in credits, which would allow us to buy a basic and cheap server for 1 month. This server had about a 14 terabytes bandwidth limit. The 8 of my friends from the core team got the credits. Me and 3 more friends of mine had already exhausted them with other projects, amounting to a total of $800 or a little over 56 terabytes. Before going all out, I needed to make sure that this was safe. I deployed the program with the ID of a student who had left the school. Somehow it was not deactivated, and the school did not notice anything. After 2 weeks of testing, we decided to roll out the entire operation. We decided to start slow. Using the core team's IDs, we unleashed the bot on the platform. After only 1 week, we had uploaded and downloaded a total of 1.2 terabytes. Weirdly, our teachers were very happy that we were maintaining our extracurricular portfolios on the platform. It was time to scale up. I got the platform IDs from 42 more students, juniors and seniors, all of whom were pissed. We made the bot go all out and deployed additional servers to speed up the platform's death. 2 days go by, and I was just browsing the file hosting services pricing. I realized that I was costing the school $90 per terabyte. By this time, my stats page showed a little over 8 terabytes had been downloaded and uploaded. I cost the school $720. But wait, there's more. I put the bot down thinking that what I was doing was a little too much. The core team was not very happy with my decision, but they honored it. It was a Thursday, and the Friday and Monday were a holiday because of a festival. After school, we found out that the maths teacher decided to give over 200 questions for practice with a note saying, "This assignment will be given an extra 20% weightage in your grades since we won't be having any formative exam this term," followed by another assignment by our English teacher for writing 3 essays in Peer, reviewing one from 3 friends. Then came my breaking point with the physics assignment. The teacher wanted us to write a 30-page investigation task about Young's double-slit experiment. We didn't even do that experiment. He wanted us to use an online simulator to collect the data. Screw it. I'm taking this nonsense down. I put bot back on. The core team was very happy with this. By this time, we had received a few more student IDs for the platform. I put all my servers so that maximum possible damage would be dealt. Within those 4 days, I downloaded and uploaded about 45 terabytes. This should have cost the school a good $4,000 or so. The school would later get a bill for the month for approximately $5,000. I wish I could see the admin's face when this happened. Needless to say, the platform was shut down within 3 days. They could have turned off the file hosting service. However, the platform would be very useless without it. The assignment workload automatically decreased, still not to a normal level because we as students did our best to send assignments in multiple parts and our lazy teachers would have a cluttered inbox, which they would have to sort through. The final bit is my favorite. Despite having had many arguments with the school management about our workload, they do acknowledge my IT skills. I go to the principal and start talking about how we should be given a little grace period as submitting assignments via emails may cause a small delay. I then casually brought up the platform and asked if we can have it back. I knew what I was doing. She said that the school had to pay a ridiculous amount of money for unknown reasons, and the infrastructure was not worth it. I chuckled and said, "Well, I bet it was the abuse by teachers who gave so many assignments which caused this. Maybe you should make sure the same does not happen to the school's email if we keep getting so many assignments." This was all nonsense, but my technologically challenged principal does not know this. 3 days later, a new rule was put in place about how much work can be given to students by each subject teacher. I was hailed as the savior of the school, since at this point everyone knew of my scheme. Some people may think that telling everyone was not a good idea, but, well, even the toppers and teachers' pets were suffering, so no one did anything. Some sophomores, who were forced to take 8 subjects, threw a party for everyone that week in celebration of the platform going away. Also, Karma awarded me. My crush asked me on a date as I was the hero of the school, and he's now my girlfriend. I hope you had a good time reading this. Note, this was a private school. Also, I am not located in the U.S. Private school is common in my country. I have specified the amount in dollar as it's just convenient. A bit of backstory. My parents got divorced 33 years ago. Oh, and at the time they both owned several houses. When they separated their assets, my mother got the home she lives in now, and my father got the home he lives in now, but he tried to still take the home she lives in by not paying the mortgage payments and not telling her he hadn't paid the mortgage. Had it not been for my godfather loaning my mom the money to get the payments up to date, my father would have put my mother and his 3 kids out on the street. Fast forward 28 years later, my father owned his own business and he was looking for someone to buy it, and so my sister offered to buy it from him. They agreed on the price and signed the contract. Now here's the rub. The business was actually a business that was losing customers because it's a dying industry, and my father never told my sister that my sister is one of the hardest workers I know, and she put everything she had into this business, and nothing she was doing was working. And that wasn't because she wasn't doing the right thing. It was because the business in and of itself was a dying medium for that industry. During the course of all this, after my father had finally retired, they got into an argument about a financial matter in dealing with the company, and my father was completely disrespectful in the way he handled it towards my sister, and he did that in front of her employees. My sister stopped talking to him at that point. Over the next couple of months, despite my sister's extensive hard work, the company went under and my sister had to close the business after it had been open for 38 years. My sister was devastated by this because not only did she put all of her hard work, her blood, sweat, and tears into it, but she also put all of her financial resources, which meant that she was financially devastated as well. My father was really upset because the company that he had created and nurtured over 38 years had been closed through, what he saw as no fault of his own. Clearly because the business closed, my sister could not continue to pay my dad a payment she was paying him for his business. Then she found out that the business had already been dying. In fact, my father had taken money out of his own account to put into the business because he knew it was dying when he sold it to her. He literally scammed his own daughter in the sale, for lack of a better way of saying it. Because she stopped paying him, he decided that he was going to sue her in court with a judge and everything. Now, for context, a few years before all of this happened, my mom had gotten sick and gone to the hospital, and at the time, I lived across the country and my brother lived across the country, and the only one who lived in the same state was my sister. My mother was afraid that if something happened to her, we wouldn't get the house, so she put the house in my sister's name since my sister lived the closest. Oh, the house was still in my mother's name as well, but my sister's name was added to it after my mom got out of the hospital. She never got around to changing it. So when my father started threatening to sue, My sister went through her assets and realized that my mother's house was still in her name and switched it back over to just my mother's name. In our state, however, we have a law that if you think someone fraudulently switches an asset out of their name in order to avoid being sued for it, you can sue them for that asset still, and it's up to them to prove that it wasn't fraudulently transferred. So when my father decided to sue my sister, he added my mother's house to the lawsuit as one of the things he wanted. He didn't sue my sister for the house that she owns in her name with her husband in a whole other city. He sued her for a house she hasn't lived in over 25 years, and a house that she has not put any money into ever in her life. Now, when he first filed the suit, I thought he was just trying to force my sister to talk to him, because I couldn't imagine any parent, let alone my parents, actually suing their child. But he actually went through with it. He initially told me that he was suing from my mother's house because the lawyer told him he had to sue for all of her assets. And since my mother's house had been in her name, he had to sue for that as well as her house. But then I found out he wasn't suing her for her house. He was suing her only for my mother's house. He's still mad that he didn't get my mother's house 33 years ago when they got a divorce. So mad that he lost in that case that he decided to go after her house the first chance he got. And this was it 33 years later. But the even more messed up thing is that when I found out he was going after my mother's house, I myself told him, if you go through with this lawsuit and you win my mother's house and you take her house away from her, I will never forgive you. I will never forgive you. I will never talk to you again. You will lose me. And losing me will also mean you lose your grandchild. Your only grandchild, so you need to think about whether or not this is worth it to you. And he still went through with it. He still went through with it, knowing that he would not only lose my sister, but me as well. He filed this lawsuit 5 years ago, and they just got through going to court. So for the last 5 years, he's forced his daughter, his princess, his baby girl, to suffer under the weight of knowing that her father, A, screwed her over, B, was putting money before her, and C, apparently felt no real remorse or sadness to hurting his own child emotionally, mentally, and financially. The worst part is, he didn't just teach her that. He taught all 3 of his kids with this one act. He did all of this because he thinks that even though he got everything in the divorce, with the exception of primary custody of us kids in that one house, that he is entitled to take my mom's house after 33 years of her living there, putting all of her time and energy into making it a home for us kids and putting her own money into improving it and her paying off the mortgage on her own as a single mother while raising 3 teenage children on what would be considered poverty wages today. We grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. He hasn't put a dime into that property since 1988, and yet he somehow feels like he's entitled to take it away from my mother without even caring about the damage it would do to his own children. And you know how some people have some idea in their head that it's okay to mistreat your kid if they're not your biological kids, like a stepchild or foster child or an adoptive child, which I think is disgusting in its own right, but there are people out there who actually believe that. So for those out there who actually believe that it's okay to mistreat your child if they're not your biological child, I say this. It's not like we're like his stepchildren, foster children, children he adopted, or any other random crazy excuse that some random people try to use to justify their own abuse of their children. We're his biological flesh and blood, and there's no denying it, because we look very similar to him and his family. I just can't stop thinking, what kind of sick jerk sues their own kid? Update. A lot of people here have said that my sister needed to do her due diligence in examining the business. My sister did examine all of the business records for the last 10 years, and she had a lawyer go over the contract with a fine-tooth comb. It wasn't a matter of her not doing her due diligence. It was a matter of the business records that she was given were very different from the business records that held the actual information necessary. For lack of a better way to say it, he cooked the books, and for those wondering the outcome, she actually did file a countersuit for him selling her a business that was unviable. She was able to prove in court that the business was failing before he sold it to her, and that the equipment he sold her was equipment that he had bought 20 years ago and was no longer usable when it came to the technology of today. Also, I was already pretty sure that no jury worth their salt would give him a house that my sister never put a dime in and hadn't lived in for over 25 years, especially when he wasn't going after any of her other assets. I was right. When they got to court, my sister told the judge and the jury that she didn't want anything from him in her countersuit. She didn't want money. She didn't want anything from him but for this to be over. He told the court and the jury he just wanted my mother's house in lieu of the $300,000 my sister owed him for the business. My father lost his lawsuit. My sister won her lawsuit and was given $0, as that's what she was asking for. So he permanently lost one daughter. And the other one, myself, is seriously questioning whether or not I want to talk to him ever again. Over the last 10 years, I've maintained a relationship with my father, not because it's what he wanted, but because it's what I wanted. Now, I just don't know if that's something I want anymore. I don't know if I want to be around the kind of person that could suit his own child When I was 15, my mom started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later, he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboard, self-built half-pipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my stuff cluttering up his garage. 2 months later, he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there, it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day, he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection, and got rid of it all because 15-year-old boys should be playing football and baseball, not being a nerd playing with Pokemon cards and reading comics and books. I would like to add that he was a middle school teacher, and in his off-time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports game. My mom never intervened, and in fact acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money because the little jerk will just spend it on comics and other useless stuff. One day, I took maybe $3 and change out of his change jar so that I could buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of a jerk and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I had done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me. At that point, I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to my home, I found out that he had been trying to talk my mom into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again, and between having run away several times and the larceny charge, I ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple years miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating suicide. Once I was out on my own, I didn't speak to my mom for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point they had married. I was a lot bigger than I had been as a young teenager, and had gotten into weightlifting, so he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer, and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him, so she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation, and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months, and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly before they started dating, and my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house, and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation, and despite the agreement had been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal, I put an immediate end to that. He was past the deadline to remove his personal effects, and they were now legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. I sold his baseball card collection, around $14,000, and his autographed sports memorabilia, roughly $11,000, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made, $6,500, I think. I kept his mother's engagement ring, platinum band, 3 diamonds, roughly 2 carats, wedding band, his coin collection, I also collect coins, and some tools and other odds and ends. Now comes the real fun. Around a month ago, I finally saw him at the grocery store. As he was leaving, I approached him. I told him I had sold his collections as he was pushing his cart out towards his car. He reacted exactly as I expected. He took a swing at me multiple times. I already had my phone ready to dial 911. Several of these punches missed, and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s, and I'm no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try to punch me as I spoke to the 911 operator, and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result, he lost his job and pension at the local middle school, and because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother, ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, causing several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and my girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least, that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at the time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or help him out, so the abusive stepfather ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so that he could afford the rent on his crappy little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though that Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or to purchase anything that I need. I purposely stand in line longer than I need to just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line, he attempted to ring up multiple items more than one time to overcharge me, and when I called him on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him that it was an accident, but he learned that he can't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and had to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me backed me up and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him die a little bit inside, and it gives me such satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money, I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize I had a rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll use my credit card." I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday when he works again, I'm going to go buy my daughter one of their better above-ground pools. And as he's wringing it out, tell him I know that my daughter is just going to love this pool. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway. It was 2019, and my 28th birthday was coming up. To recap how birthdays were in my family. Growing up, birthday parties for the whole family were mandatory, but they were mostly used as an excuse for everyone to tell you that you weren't good enough in exchange for mediocre presents. As such, I stopped having birthday parties the moment I moved out. I actually wanted to celebrate that year, but I knew that if I just had the usual kind of party, there was no way I was going to enjoy any of it. So I came up with a good alternative. I booked some lanes at a bowling alley and made reservations at a nearby restaurant afterwards. I planned to invite my immediate family, my boyfriend, and 3 extended family members, parents and their son, because they're usually not as dramatic and petty as the rest of them. Before I had time to send out the invites, my dad texted me, entitled, "Dad, hey, just so you know I've taken the whole day off on your birthday so you can use my house to have your party." Me. Oh wow, you didn't have to do that? I'm at work most of the day, and I've actually planned something different this year. I'm sending invitations out in a little bit. Oh, okay, but the offer still stands. I sent out the invitations. He seemed satisfied, and I moved on. The next day, I received more texts, entitled, "Dad, don't you think you should invite your entitled grandparents?" Me. No, I don't think they would enjoy bowling, and if I invite them, I'll have to invite entitled uncle, his girlfriend, and their 4 kids, and I can't afford to book the extra lane to accommodate them. Partly true, partly not inviting them because they're the ones who always end up complaining, and they start weird petty drama all the time. I think you should just have the party at my house. That way everyone can come. I'd rather stick to my plan for my birthday. Thanks. I already told them we're having the party at my house, so you should probably call your entitled grandparents and tell them that the party is off. You did what? That's incredibly disrespectful of you, and not my problem. I'm not taking the blame for something you did behind my back. I'm having my birthday at the bowling alley with the guests I invited. You can either choose to deal with this yourself and come bowling, or have your own party with whoever you invited. There is no in-between, and that's final. My entitled dad sent some angry texts afterwards that I didn't reply to. Then he called my mom to have her pressure me into inviting them, to which I could only tell her the same thing I'd told my dad. There was going to be drama whether I invited them or not, and I'd rather have a good birthday for once and deal with the nonsense later. I ended up having a really great birthday. Everyone seemed to have a lot of fun, including my entitled father, even if he seemed a little quiet. We reconciled at a later time, at which he told me that naturally my entitled grandparents and entitled uncle were very mad at me. They never take anything up in person, so I just let them be angry and nothing else really came from it. Since then, I've been very firm on boundaries with my entitled dad, which has resulted in less entitlement. This may not be true malicious compliance, but good story. Back in the mid-90s at age 19, I bought a little used car from a used car dealership. No car they sold was overly expensive. Nothing under 3 years old. The car I bought had an outstanding recall, so the used car dealer was taking it to Ford for me. So after driving it for a week, I dropped it off at the dealer to take it to a Ford shop. Dropped it off and was given a loaner. I got a phone call later that the mechanic was in an accident and car was badly damaged. He was okay. There was ultimately a dispute on who was responsible for causing the accident. Car was not repairable, nor would I want it after repairs. The person who called was asking me about insurance coverage. I straight away said that it's on them. My insurance company also got involved too, as another driver made a claim. The dealer also tried to say my insurance would cover me for a loaner vehicle. You had to be 25 to rent from Enterprise. I was 19, nor should I put that on my insurance. Nope, I said I'm keeping the loaner they provided me originally till it's worked out. 2 weeks later, the owner agreed to replace the car and cover damages keeping my insurance out of it. Maybe the fact I knew and worked for a lawyer friend had something to do with his decision in a nice letter my lawyer friend sent. The owner said, "Come pick any car you want off the lot." Great, I'll take the loaner vehicle. It was nice and drove great. Owner says, well, that's my wife's fully loaded car she likes to drive. We were figuring something similar to your previous car. My lawyer friend immediately, who came with me, ensured no nonsense occurred, says you just contracted verbally. He could have any car on the lot. The loaner is on your lot, dealer tagged, and is on your books as a vehicle for sale, and given how this issue was handled. Dealers would get cars in and drive them on dealer tags for personal use. The owner's wife was doing that with the loaner. They gave me thinking originally I'd only have it for a day. Needless to say, the loaner vehicle was signed over to me. Left with a $7,500 fully loaded car V's, my $4,500 destroyed car, and a signed agreement they were financially responsible. He did say any car. So a while back, my brother-in-law was talking about messing with spam calls, and it inspired me of a way to get them to back off me and my phone number for a good long while. What's worse than a spammer calling your phone multiple times a day? Someone at your front door trying to convert you. So every time an unknown caller popped up on my phone and I had nothing else to do like driving to an appointment, I'd pick up the phone and wait or press whatever button safely to get to a real person. They'd start their spiel about being from some kind of fraud department, and then, in my deepest Southern accent, for effectiveness, I'd act surprised and then say, "Now, before we get started with this, have you accepted our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ into your soul?" Nothing against Christians. I was raised Christian, but regardless of religion, there's nothing more uncomfortable than having a religion of any kind forced on you. 9 times out of 10, there's a brief pause before they hang up on me. In the rarer 1 out of 10 case, they either try to play along or try to continue their script. If it's the first, relentlessly bug them for their favorite psalm and how they plan to spread the word with their mighty communication powers. If the second, be relentless. After all, you have to make sure you're dealing with someone with true godly values. Anyways, hope this fits here, because laying on the guilt for that 110 that the sinners will pay in the fires of hell has usually been the absolute breaking point for a lot of them. I genuinely think I'm now on their do not call list because I don't think I've had the bizarre satisfaction of messing with any scam calls for at least 3-4 months now.